And that is how a white turnip is magically converted into a red turnip. And that's the end of the show. Hey, you've been a really great audience. I'm going to take a little break, but I'll be back in 20 minutes with more fantastic food magic. Food plebeians, I don't know. Oh, you don't believe that food's magic, huh? Okay, all right, fine. Tell me this. How else but by magic could a plain, ordinary pitcher of cow juice convert itself wonderfully and magically into a round of camembert cheese? All right, that's mostly bacteria that does that, but... okay, I know. How about popcorn? Popcorn. How else but by the powers of magic could these tiny, little hard beads possibly convert themselves into giant piles of white fluffy goodness? Except by magic. Sorry about that. All right, so that's mostly pressure from water vapor. All right, I know. Ham. How else but by magic could this common, lowly, everyday leg of pig convert itself into a rich, luscious, delicious, fragrant, wonderful, beautiful, fragrant, and I mention ridiculously delicious ham? All right, so there's some osmosis, chemistry, smoke, and time involved. But hey, anytime you can feed 20 people for $1 a head, I say that's magic. Besides, if you're willing to try out a few spells of your own, you'll find that ham is not only magic, but it's good eats. I admit there's nothing really magical about my favorite porcine preparation, but I will tell you that it'll help if you know the lay of the ham, okay? Up here, you've got the loin, all chops or a really good roast right there. Down here, you've got the belly. That's where the bacon comes from. Up here, the shoulder or Boston butt. That is the home of fine barbecue. Right below that, you've got the picnic shoulder, also known as the picnic ham. It can be smoked and cured, but do not ever confuse it with the true ham, which runs from the H-bone up here all the way down to the shank. This stuff is real magic. Where'd it go? I don't know. If you were to take this fresh or green ham home and cook it, you'd end up with a really great roast. But it wouldn't taste any more like ham than grape juice does fine burgundy. Now we can juice this analogy even further because this can be processed into nearly as many distinct final forms as this. In fact, even the federal government recognizes 4 distinct ham classifications. The United States Department of Agriculture recognizes 4 classifications of processed ham, each defined by its water-to-protein ratio. A ham containing at least 20.5% protein and no added water may bear the label ham. A ham containing no less than 18.5% protein may be labeled ham in natural juice. Such hams are usually sold on the bone and may be either fully or partially cooked for your convenience. If a ham contains up to 10% added water while maintaining at least 17% protein, it must be labeled as ham, water added. Many ready-to-serve spiral sliced hams fall into this category. Hams labeled as ham and water product can legally contain more water than ham and are usually boned, reconstituted, and molded or tumbled into a ham-like shape. Ham-like shape. You're kidding, right? If, after curing, smoking, brining, and cooking, a ham's weight exceeds its original green weight, it must be labeled according to the amount of water that has been added. And no, sir, we never kid. Okay, settle down. These may all call themselves ham, but the similarity really ends there. Now let me say that when I see a pig grow a leg shaped like this, I'll consider eating a ham that's shaped like this, but not a minute before. Besides, most of the reconstituted hams have been speed pickled via injection with something that looks like this. Ugh. Also, I'm kind of dubious about any ham lacking a skeletal component, okay? I mean, even if bones didn't add to the flavor of the ham and make terrific seasoning agents later on for soups, beans, greens, and the like, I might still be troubled by the question of, once the bones are gone, what holds this together? Could it be I can't even say it. Now, by far, the largest group of market hams are referred to as city hams. Now, whether they're water added or in natural juiced, these hams are partially cured in a sweet brine before being lightly smoked and cooked. Now, these are mild-mannered, crowd-pleasing hams, which make up for their lack of depth with a user-friendly versatility. Now, city hams usually come in one of two different halves. Now, this is a shank end, and here is a rump end right here. Now, this looks like it might be easier to carve and therefore a better value, but there's a lot of connective tissue in there, so I skip it and stick with the shank end. Country hams are a whole other food. First, they are rubbed or packed in a dry cure composed of salt, sodium nitrate, and sometimes sugar and pepper. After that, they're hung, sometimes for months, sometimes with smoke, sometimes without. But during that time, the salt pulls moisture out of the ham, leaving it a bacterial desert, not to mention a whole lot lighter than it was when it started. The resulting flavor is amazingly complex. It's almost like a small batch bourbon, and the texture is being compared to fine-aged cheddar. How is it that country hams can laugh in the face of refrigeration without ill effect? Because they're dehydrated biological salt licks, hibernating mud skippers, mummies, if you like. And mummies just aren't known for their good looks. Of course, if you'd been packed in salt and hung up in a sack for a year or two, you'd probably need a long soak too. And that is all that this needs. But we've got this hawk down here. Now, I admit that makes a very respectable handle, but in the world of kitchen currency, this has higher value elsewhere, i.e. a big old pot of collard greens. So ask your butcher to take it off, or take matters into your own hands. When you come up, there we go. Now, we'll freeze that and use it later. As for this, well, it needs to soak, but I don't have a pot this big. But I do have a cooler. It's even got a little drain right here on the bottom for easy water changes. Now, why would I want to give a ham a bath? Well, the same reason we brined that turkey in our Pulitzer-winning episode, Romancing the Bird, only backwards. Imagine, if you will, that this night spot is our ham, and it's packed with salt, played by these dorky-looking guys. Now, we want that salt out of there, but we're going to have to go in and get it. That means getting past this salt membrane, which is a kind of biological bouncer. Lucky for us, he's got a weakness for balanced osmotic pressure, so he'll happily let water, played by these lovely ladies, slide right on by. When they come out later on, they've got salt in tow. Of course, if we want to get more salt out, we'll have to send more water in. Which is why I'll change this water twice a day for 2 days. That looks good. By the way, if you're going to do this outside, be sure to stash your cooler in the bushes, else somebody's going to steal your ham and hawk it. Never mind. What does our country ham have in common with Forrest Gump? Just go and drink about 13 Dr. Peppers. Well, maybe not 13, but certainly enough to come half to 2/3 of the size of this disposable aluminum roasting pan. Now, you can use any flavorful liquid you like, apple juice, wine, cola, beer, whatever. I tend to think sweeter is better, and you know, the doctor just brings a certain twang to the party. Of course, if you had some sweet pickle juice on hand, sweet, you could bring that on too. Next, we need a tent made from 2 pieces of white aluminum foil crimped together down the middle. That's going to look kind of like something that fell off of Mir, okay? Now just crimp that on to the edges of the pan, all the way around. Get a good seal, but don't push down on the ham. We're not trying to wrap it, we're trying to tint it. Give it an environment where the heat and moisture can circulate around. There, good seal. And into a 400-degree oven for half an hour. Now when that's up, drop the oven temperature to 325 and cook for another hour and a half. Then pull the whole thing out, take off the foil, and flip the ham over so that the doctor can get to work on the other side of the ham. Cover it back up, put it in, and then insert the probe of your probe thermometer into the deepest part of the ham and set your target temperature for 140 degrees. Now, if you don't have one of these, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that you're going to have to come back every half an hour and check the temperature by hand. How long is it going to take in the end? Well, that depends. We have ham. Now, if all has gone well, we will have a dark mahogany beauty. There. Thermometer out. The moment of truth. There we go. Mirror won't be using that anymore. Now, that looks great. You notice that the meat, which used to be all the way up to the level of the bone, has drawn up. So it's really plumped up and gotten juicy. In fact, yep, see how loose that bone is? That's what the old-timers would use as kind of a pop-up thermometer. So this is more than ready to go, but it needs to kind of rest for about half an hour before we carve. And that's going to give us just enough time to bone up on porcine anatomy. Here is our ham. Here, of course, is the rump end. This is the shank end. Now, this little critter right here is called the H-bone, and it is a very inconvenient bone to have to get around. It is connected to the leg bone's connected to the knee bone's connected to the shank bone's connected to, well, would be connected to the foot bone. Only this little piggy didn't make it to the market with its trotters intact. Now, here's our strategy. We're going to harvest most of our slices from the bottom 2/3 of the ham, starting from the shank end and moving our way upwards. That way, we will avoid the H-bone and its blade confounding configuration. So here we have the knee, and I'm just going to take a chunk off of the rump right above the kneecap. Now we've got kind of a nice platform to work. There. So I'm going to come back about an inch from the shank and take out a wedge. Now just follow this angle. Use it almost as a template for slicing all the way back to the dreaded H-bone. Just remember, whatever you do, country ham is strong juju, so slice thinly. Now, besides the traditional applications, my favorite of which is biscuits and ham, you can basically use this in any way that you would, say, prosciutto. You can wrap it around pieces of melon and toss it with some asparagus, maybe. What I usually do is carve the whole side like that at the table, serve up everybody, then go back in the kitchen and just lop off the rest of the big pieces of meat and just carve it up whenever. That'll leave you with the main piece of the rump at the end. You can pick that off and put it into, I don't know, soup beans if you like. And then, of course, that leaves the bone. And the bone, of course, is a whole nother matter. I like to serve city hams at parties because people love them. They usually come in half portions, and because, well, they're just pretty darn tasty, as long as you take the time to tinker with them a little bit. Now, unlike country hams, city hams have been cooked, but not always to the same degree, okay? They've all been cooked to at least 137 degrees, hot enough to kill the occasional microbial agent, but not hot enough to be called cooked from a culinary standpoint. Now, such hams are usually labeled partially cooked or needs cooking, but most city hams have been fully cooked and can call themselves ready to eat or fully cooked, which isn't to say they wouldn't profit from a long, slow, manipulated reheating process, which means a little geometrical surgery. We'll need our culinary scoring knife. Okay, it's a utility knife, mat knife, got it at the local hardware store. Open it up to the second click, okay? Then you will need a roasting pan with an old kitchen towel in the bottom. Nothing fancy, but clean, all right? Deposit your drained ham thusly. Now, we're going to execute the diamond pattern that is adored by ham lovers everywhere. It goes like this. Start at the bottom of the ham and barely moving on the diagonal, slice upwards. And move your way all the way around the ham. You don't have to get it exact, don't have to be perfect about it, but do make sure that you've got the blade all the way in. What we're looking for here is uniformity of depth. What that's going to do is it's going to let a lot of excess fat out during the cooking process, and we could definitely stand to get rid of some. And it's also going to open up kind of a portal to allow flavors in, which we will definitely take advantage of a little later. And once you've worked your way all the way around like that, we're going to go the other direction. I just put the knife in the other hand and do the same cut, but move upward the other way. And watch out for your finger. There, you can see that diamond shape already happening. That's going to open up even more in the oven. I really think the utility knife is the best tool for this job because it's really the only way to get a uniform cut. There we go. Now, once again, we will need a piece of Mir space station. If you cannot get a piece of space station, it's another double width of wide aluminum foil crimped together. And again, we're going to make a tent. Don't want to push it down on the ham. Just want to crimp it around the pan like this. And make sure you get the handles. And go for as tight of a seal as you can. So basically, we want to keep heat and moisture in. There. Nothing really touching the ham, so there won't be any sticking. Good. Now, most packages that city hams come in suggest baking or reheating at 350 degrees. I think that's just a little too hot. I like to go with a slower roast, 250 for 3 to 4 hours, or until the deep dark center of that meat reaches 130 degrees. And when that happens, we're ready for the crust. The best ham crust that I have ever tasted was invented by my grandmother, Ma May, who also makes a passable batch of biscuits. Anyway, this thing's really delicious, and for years I've been asking her, can I please have that recipe? And she kept saying, oh, it's too hard for you. And then finally, last year, for Christmas no less, I get an envelope containing the recipe for her ham crust. And I look at it, and I'm kind of feeling ripped off because there's only 4 ingredients. Brown sugar, mustard, bourbon, which I always keep around in a spray bottle anyway, and the secret, she said, ginger snap cookies pulverized in a food processor. So I say to her, 4 ingredients, what's the big deal? She says, well, it's the way they're put together. I say, well, how are they put together? She says, next Christmas, dear. So I hope you like it because I gave up 2 whole years of plaid boxers for it. Oh, all the other hardware? A basting brush. Let's see how our city cousin's doing here. Yeah, that's coming along very nicely. As you can see by looking down in the bottom of the pan, there's a good bit of fat in the bottom of the pan, and that ran out from all of these perforations that we made. Now, this is actually rind. That's the actual pork skin, and it tastes pretty darn good if you treat it right, but the crust doesn't stick to it real well, so just go around and quickly pull it off. It's only going to take a little bit of effort. Okay, now we've got a nice platform for a glaze, okay? Meat all around. There's a little bit of fat, but that's good. We don't want things to be too dry. So, the first layer is a wet layer, the mustard. Just paint it on. I generally work from the bottom up. You don't have to get it super thick, but you do kind of want to apply some pressure so that you really kind of get it into all those cracks. Layer 2 is a dry layer. Brown sugar. The darker, the better. Okay, brown sugar's got molasses in it, and that's going to bring a lot of flavor to the party. Now, this is kind of a two-hand operation. Think sprinkle, not push, okay? Just going to kind of sprinkle it on. Use one hand to kind of pat as it falls. You're going to get a little mustard on you, but you know what? That's okay. Now, odds are good that this is going to be wet enough to take on the next layer, but just in case, we're going to give it a little more flavor. Bourbon. So just give it a light spritz. The final layer, the secret, the ginger snap cookies. This is the thing that she held out on me for so very long. We're basically going to repeat the same action that we did with the brown sugar. This is just a sprinkling. I'm use 2 hands here, ever so lightly. Now this layer we kind of want thick, okay? As thick as you can get it to take. There. It's beautiful, but it needs to go back into the oven. And the crust needs a little more heat to set. So raise your temperature to 350 degrees. This is only going to take about an hour. We just want to get the meat up about another 10 degrees and set that crust, which you can cut as thin or as thick as you like. I like to kind of cut it on the bias. I get a little bit more crust that way. Now, once you and yours have finished picking this off, I sure hope you won't throw away the bone. Unless, of course, it's to throw it in that pot of soup beans you got going over there. As far as keeping hold of this thing, well, truth is a set of vice grips does a pretty fine job. Well, we hope that we have whet your appetite for the abracadabra that is the American ham. Whether you lean towards the city or the country, you should stick to some pretty clear rules. Only buy hams that are clearly labeled as just plain ham or ham and natural juices, okay? And stay away from anything that's shaped more like an iMac computer than the hind leg of an animal. Same thing for boneless cuts, just not natural. If you buy a country ham, make sure you buy it far enough ahead to give it a couple of days time to soak. And always remember to slash a city ham to let some of that fat out. Either way, ham's magical stuff, as well as good eats.